So Ikigai refers to all these things, not just one element of our life, but all of it as an integrated, coherent process, enjoyed by you. So you are at the center of this Ikigai universe.
That is neuroscientist and author Ken Mogi, and this is episode 6 of the Ikigai Podcast. Find your Ikigai at ikigaitribe.com. It's Nick here from ikigaitribe.com, and today I have a very special guest, Ken Mogi. And Ken is a neuroscientist and has a PhD in physics from the University of Tokyo. Ken also works at the Sony Research Laboratory, teaches at several universities, appears in the media quite often, and travels abroad and within Japan giving lectures on concepts such as Ikigai and the brain, and has also authored over 100 books, including the Little Book of Ikigai, or Awaken Your Ikigai. Ken, thank you so much for your time today.
Wow, it's such a pleasure to talk to you, Nick.
Thank you. So, Ken, I follow you on Twitter, and you come across as a very happy and life-loving person. On Twitter, you often share your small joys and the wonders of life, and you reflect on these things and you share them in your posts and videos. So you seem to have a lot of Ikigai in your life. And I know you describe Ikigai as a spectrum from the small things, little joys, to the pursuit of life-defining goals. So would you like to touch on that?
Yes, I think it's very important to realize that it's all often the small things that makes us rock. Because at the end of the day, we are living in a global economy, and you feel pressure to do better and prove yourself. So you tend to focus on big goals, but that's not really the thing that makes up your Ikigai. I mean, Ikigai starts from very small things like just having a cup of coffee, just like I'm doing now.
Yep.
Yeah, you can join me. My biggest goal probably as a neuroscientist is to understand consciousness and also understand the foundations of creativity. These are big goals, but at the same time, I can find joys as you described in small things like having a coffee or going for a run every morning, or having a chat like this. With
we are now.
So yeah, as you said, spectrum is a really important word, isn't it? I mean, it's a spectrum that constitute our life, and Ikigai is no exception.
Yeah, I agree. I think we forget that happiness is really fleeting moments, and we don't. I think we miss out on fleeting moments of happiness because we're so focused on big goals, or we're preoccupied.
Exactly.
And so I agree that we need to enjoy the smaller things and appreciate them, because if we don't, we're not going to have these little moments of happiness. We'll just be stressed and worried all the time. So with the word, Ken, Ikigai, what I've found interesting about Ikigai and many other words is the deep meaning, and they're very hard for Westerners to, I guess in the West we want a concise meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously many of these words like Ikigai and Wabi-Sabi and maybe Kokorozashi, which we might touch on, you can't get a concise definition because it's deep, it's very cultural. And Japanese are almost the opposite. Japanese don't need a concise definition. They understand the concept, I guess, from living in Japan and growing up in the culture. But what I've noticed with Ikigai is that the suffix gai or kai can be added to different verbs. So I'll give a few examples for our audience. So hataraku, the verb to work, we can add gai, and that would be hataraki gai.
Yeah.
Finding purpose in work or the value in work, and even the verb play, asobu, asobi gai. So as those two examples, would Ikigai encompass Hatarakigai and Asobigai?
Yeah, exactly. You are spot on there. I mean, Ikigai is such a all-inclusive, integrating concept. And so the important thing is, today we talk a lot about work-life balance.
Yes.
And, you have to enjoy work as well as, really deriving something from play and getting together and so on. So Ikigai refers to all these things, not just one element of our life, but all of it as an integrated, coherent process, enjoyed by you. So you are at the center of this Ikigai universe. And within the Ikigai universe, you have many, many different plants, flowers, trees, and so on, which grow and gives you joy. But, at the end of the day, Ikigai is the single comprehensive umbrella term to, describe all of it. So, yeah, you're spot on. Yeah.
So that's really a contrast to the misinterpretation of it almost being a framework for like your dream job or being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, probably a Western bias, really. When I say Western bias, I'm not saying that it's necessarily a bad thing, but
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese approach is, I think, different from that.
Yes.
I have a funny story because, in the Buddhist monk training period, people talk a lot about satori, enlightenment. The purpose of this Buddhist training is to achieve enlightenment, satori. But as you said, this concept is so, poorly defined. So even a high priest doesn't know, cannot describe what a satori, enlightenment is. So as you said, without these formal definitions, the Japanese are really good at doing practice every day. So I think that's something that is probably different from the Western approach. Starting from definitions and so.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, when I first came to Japan and learned about Japan, it was a source of frustration, not fully understanding concepts. But now I see it as truth and beauty because there are many things we can't fully understand, or that they just take us a long time, and we need a lot of life experience. So I really think these words do reflect the truth of life.
Uh-huh.
And Japanese seem to have this innate ability to understand that. Whereas in the West, we seek clarity and we want to understand almost immediately, and that's just not possible.
Yeah.
So let's touch on your book, Ken. Your book, I think it has two titles. So I've got this version of it, and that's
Oh, the English version, I think, and yeah.
The Little Book of Ikigai, the essential Japanese way to finding purpose in life. But I think in the American market, it's called Awakening Your Ikigai.
Yeah, because it's a typical British way to put the Little Book of Ikigai. The Little Book. This is really British, but in the American market, they don't really like this idea that this is just a little book. So they have more grander, grand visions, and awakening your Ikigai is a typical, approach to. Yeah. Anyway, so there are two different versions across the Atlantic Ocean.
I was just going to say, you're not just a neuroscientist; you're also a very good marketer.
No, I mean, I didn't, actually change the title. I mean, they did, the American public. Yeah.
Okay, but that's interesting how
Yeah.
you approach the different markets
Yeah.
with a different title.
Yeah.
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 So yeah, I've read the book a few times. As I mentioned before, I've got lots of almost every page is highlighted. I wrote notes, so I found it very worthwhile and beneficial to me. And of course, I recommend it. I'd like to touch on the 5 pillars you introduce in the book, and just touch on them and maybe quote a few passages. So you
Yeah.
introduce 5 pillars. starting small,
Mhm.
releasing yourself, harmony and sustainability, the joy of little things, and being in the here and now.
Yeah.
And today, I'd actually like to start from 5 and go down to the first one.
Yeah.
Being in the here and now, you mentioned the value of being present, and you mentioned how children value the present because they have no definite idea of the past or future. And so, in a way to be present, would it be helpful for us to bring out our inner child?
Yes, definitely. What's interesting, Nick, in the era of artificial intelligence and information technology in general, bringing out your inner child can be the most adaptive, highly paying attitude that you can take. Because look at these IT guys, as depicted, for example, in this great comedy, Big Bang Theory. All these rocket scientists, they are really childish, and so being, together with your inner child, I think is a really creative, successful attitude that you can take in today's world. Apart from that, in your private life, I think being a child again, all over again, is a really key attitude when you want to bring a happiness to your life and to the lives of others that matter to you, right? You don't agree? I mean, so when you're having a party with your friends and families, really you become a child again, carefree, spontaneous. Yeah, so that's the whole point, I think.
I agree, and I think it's something we should incorporate in our lives more.
Yeah,
And there's a Twitter I remember you did, I think a few months ago. I think someone, obviously a Japanese person, maybe asked you for an example of being in the here and now,
hmm?
and you held the phone and you ran down a track screaming "wee" almost like a child.
Yeah, I did.
And I
Yeah,
just thought, I thought you were amazing because I thought, here you are, you're, this important person, you're a scientist, but you're quite comfortable being a child, in the true sense of
I am actually.
living in the moment.
Yeah, I don't, maybe it's true for any society, but in Japan, we also have people who kind of adjust to their social roles, and their social roles become their lives. And it's an adaptation, but I think it's also a tragic loss of opportunities. And, I'm sure in Australia too, there are people who just become their profession, like bankers, lawyers,
Mm.
teachers, who just become that profession and, nothing more. But when you were a child, there were infinite possibilities, and your
Yes.
existence was not really defined by any social roles or status or so on. So I think being a child is a really important technique to remain creative and free and learning and so on. Yeah.
Yeah, I found that really insightful, and it kind of it did make sense to me. So let's move on to pillar 4, the joy of little things. And now you mentioned that's about sensory pleasure, and I just want to quote something from the book. So, no matter where you are in the world, if you make a habit of having your favorite things sooner after you get up, for example, chocolate and coffee,
Yeah.
dopamine will be released in your brain, reinforcing actions, getting up,
Yeah.
prior to the receipt of the reward, which would be chocolate and coffee in this case. And then you go on to say, make the joy of little things work for you, and then you can also you can start your day with some ikigai.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about this is it really is backed up by neuroscience.
Mhm.
You're using dopamine
Yeah.
to reward yourself,
Right.
but not really to reward yourself, just to give you ikigai in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Dopamine is really proactive. It's you really need to take some action to release it, and so that's the beauty of it. Because after all, practicing ikigai is involving yourself in a series of actions. Of course, for example, when you meditate, in the brain, the so-called default mode network is activated, which is very important, which kind of supports your mind wandering and, sort out your memories and, dissolve your emotional tension. That's so in inaction, not taking any action and meditate is sometimes important, but, during the rest of your day, you really have to, take in and more active roles, and it's the day is a series of actions, right? Little chores like shower and putting your clothes and so on. So ikigai is all about making these small actions into pleasurable, rewarding experiences. So you can start from your morning chore of taking a cup of coffee and chocolate, and I personally, I do that every morning, and I immediately start doing some writing or reading in the morning, and my day just goes on and on and on without resting or inactive period, because I can do that because I'm in almost constant state of flow. How about you? Do you find that statement is true for you?
Yeah, absolutely. What I notice, if I get up early and commit to something, it's like, yeah, I think there's an expression: if you win the morning, you win the
Yeah,
day. And so if you are proactive in the morning, yeah, your day will just flow. And at the end of it, you might be tired, but you'll think, oh, I had a good day today. I did all these things, and all these kind of positive things happened. If I get up and I'm feeling tired or lazy, and then the longer I'm in that state, the harder it is to get moving.
yeah. So I'm always amazed, when I meet people who says that their mornings suck. I mean, they cannot really, bring themselves out of bed, and I cannot really understand how that can happen, but it does happen. And in Japan, we have a program called hikikomori. Maybe you have heard, people confine themselves to their rooms and houses, and that can happen because when you get up, you cannot really kickstart your actions from small things, starting from small things. So I suspect, yes, I suspect with some people, maybe they are aiming too high from the beginning, and it's all or nothing. And if they cannot really win big, they don't feel it's not worth it, to try. But I am someone who really thinks it's okay to just do small things if you yeah, if you don't achieve anything, well, because it doesn't really matter. I mean, social evaluation or utility functions of the things that you do is a bonus. It's not the main reward, and the main reward is something that you define for yourself. So even if nobody else recognizes your action and pats you on your shoulder and, hey, you have done a good job, even if nobody does that, does do it, I'm fine because I define my own utility function, my own reward. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to ask, is that another contrast between Japan and the West? In the West, we have this tendency to have big goals, and we like to announce it. So I'm going to do this, and when I
Yeah.
do it, and when I get there, it's going to be great. But after that phase, we realize, oh, this is hard work, and I might fail, and there's all this stress, and then it's very hard to move forward. So I think, yeah, you're right. If you can just take pleasure in little things, and you don't need this social validation or recognition, I guess you're happier. And then if you can do that every day, after 100 days or a year, you've got this accumulation,
Yeah.
and you're probably far further ahead than setting a big goal and confronting all these fears and insecurities. So yeah, I love this, and it just makes sense. If we all stop and thought about it, there's all these wonderful little things we can experience if we're just aware of them. So obviously, being in the here and now and the joy of little things go hand in hand.
Nick. What I find most amusing about small wrestlers, they when they are interviewed after a win, they never say big things, as you said. I mean, they don't say, "I want to win and another match and get the Emperor's Cup and so on." They don't say that. They categorically say that small wrestlers. They just say, "Well, I will focus on my next boot," and that's it. They don't say any grand things. Although professional, they are really hard thinking and they really go a long distance about making strategies for their next match with the opponent. But small wrestlers don't say a thing specifically about their goals and so on. That's the spirit. And the baseball player Ichiro Suzuki, who made it big in the big major league baseball, during his, I did some interviews on Japanese public broadcaster NHK, for some programs, and he never mentions any goals for his baseball seasons, or he doesn't say anything. He just concentrates on the next batting, option, and but that way, Ichiro really broke all these records in Major League Baseball, or for the number of hits in a season and so on. So
That's right. I mean, I'm not a big fan of
yeah,
baseball, but didn't he break the hits in a
yeah,
lifetime or
yeah,
something?
So all these achievements, while he says nothing about the goals or objectives and so on, I think that's a typically Japanese way of doing something great without being boastful or
Yeah, there's a quote I actually have of you on my website, and I think it's Japanese don't need grandiose frameworks, to move forward in life. They just
uh-huh.
take, little steps.
Yeah.
And again, it's if you reflect on life, it's so true. It really is the truth of how we move forward. But I do have something about that, Ken. I want to ask, specific to Japanese culture, is you've mentioned that Ikigai is deeply embedded in Japanese culture. But I imagine for many Japanese, it would be hard for them to find Ikigai. And if we take a salary man, for example, who might
Uh-huh.
work 6 days a week and long hours,
Yeah.
and they have a long commute, and if they have a family, they see very little of their family. So, would the joy of little things work for them, or in Japan, would there just be many people who just don't have Ikigai?
Wow, Nick, have you been on a commuter train in Tokyo recently?
Not recently, but I did live in Japan for 10 years and experienced it.
Yeah, you'll be amazed. Really, really different activities people are involved. Often using the smartphones. Like some people are reading manga, and some people are reading blogs, and some people are listening to music. But they really make the most of their commuting time. As you said, salaryman,
Mm.
they have hard work. They have to work long hours, and their commuting hours tend to be long. But they are experts on making the most of these, mundane hours. So I think the Japanese have a great knack of finding small joys in the most mundane, you know, ordinary moments. So you don't have to be a rich person, being carried on a private jet or so on. I mean, the Japanese idea of a meaningful life is more modest and
Yeah.
more down to earth, I think, so.
Okay, good. Because I've always thought, yeah, they do. Japanese are more like, they seem far more resilient because they'd be, I guess I'm generalizing here, but I imagine most Australians just would not do that. If they went to Japan for a job and they were almost essentially a salary man in Japan, they would quit after 6 months or a year. They just couldn't handle it. But Japanese, yeah, seem to have this resilience. But as you also say, they seem to find more pleasure in these little moments they take advantage of in the day, in their commutes, or even my wife. I notice how she appreciates things differently to maybe how my friends do or how I do. and it's far more small. It's more focused, and she's not waffling on about it. She's not talking about what she's doing. She's just doing it privately.
Well, that's interesting. Yeah. I'm not saying that the Japanese way is the only way. I think I'm just saying that it's a new kid on the block. I mean, it's something that different cultures can meet. And, for example, I was in the UK for, my postdoc, and I really learned a lot from the British English culture. When I went to Australia, I learned a lot from Australian way of living. So I think, in the globalizing economy, I think it is very important for us to come forward to meet with other people. And I think the Ikigai concept is probably could be Japan's most interesting export, because, it's something that would touch many people's lives and change them for better, for hopefully. It's different from the Western conceptualization of what work and life should be. And, it's a new ingredient in your life. And, if you mix them, I think you can probably lead a more creative and enjoyable life. And yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, I was introduced the word in 1998,
Uh-huh.
and so back then there were really no books on the concept.
Yeah.
And I mean, a coworker just said, "Nick-san no Ikigai wa nan desu ka?" And I'm like, "Well, Ikigai," and I didn't understand. And she did the friend did her best to translate it. Like, she kind of said, "Oh, it's your life purpose or the meaning in your life," but the word stuck with me, and so now it's so prolific, and
You
it's.
also, so you were on kind of a frontier explorer for Ikigai. I'm quite impressed. 1998. Wow.
But at that time, there was really nothing on it. So I just remembered the word. It stuck with me because I thought, wow, that's a fascinating word, Ikigai. And then when 2 years ago I started seeing the Venn diagram and going, that's not, is that Ikigai? I don't think that's Ikigai. And then I found your book, and then I've now, obviously I'm reading more and more about it.
That's quite interesting and moving for me. I mean, you're really a profound person. I mean, because so many years ago, and wow, I think you have a really good intuition about what Ikigai entails, and that's great. I mean,
Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm trying to understand it and hopefully share it by
yeah,
doing these interviews. So let's move on, because there's all these gold nuggets in your book. So let's move on to the pillar of harmony and
yeah,
sustainability. Now, when we think about sustainability, we think about the environment and protecting the environment. But you also mention it in terms of
right.
relationship. And so I'll just quote again: sustainability applies not only to man's relation to nature, but also to the modes of individual activities within a social context. You should show adequate consideration for other people and be mindful of the impact your actions might have on society at large. Ideally, every social activity should be sustainable. And I think that's just wonderful advice. Every time we encounter someone, we meet with someone, rather than thinking of our own selfish kind of immediate
Uh-huh.
needs, if we can think beyond that, it would create harmony and sustainability.
The Japanese people are notorious for not speaking out, and not taking any definite positions. But when you do speak out and when you do take some definite positions, it also means that you alienate some people. And in politics, there are friends and foes. And if you, for example, take a certain political position, it can be good sometimes to bring about social changes, but at the same time, it can lead to dichotomies and people fragmented in society, and that's actually what we are seeing today, I think. So Japanese imperial family. I mean, it's the oldest hereditary monarchy in the world. They do not take any political positions at all. I mean, emperor, empress, but that's the secret of it. This uh, balancing act of trying to go over people's, people in different clusters of society and so on. I think that the average Japanese person are really good at it, in a company or in society or in general. Although they don't speak out, that doesn't mean they do not have any opinions, but they feel that just, stating your opinion might make you feel good for a brief moment, but in the long run, it doesn't necessarily solve social issues or make society progress. So yeah, I think probably sustainability and harmony. I think that's probably one of the best kept secrets of Japanese society, and one of the testimony is the longest running imperial family in the world. I mean, the fact that they have been able to keep this system so long is a great testimony to the fact of, to this great kept, hidden mystery of Japanese sustainability.
Yeah, it's another example of this kind of long-term approach to things rather than short-term. And I guess when I came to Japan, and again, it's something I misunderstood because I thought Japanese are so vague. They never say what they want, and I would hear complaints from businessmen saying there's Japanese they're very ceremonial, and you go into a meeting and you've organised this time, and they don't really tell you anything. And it took me a long time to realise they're really considering more than just themselves. In that way,
Yeah.
there's no damage to the relationship, or there's no confusion or no conflict, and it can become sustainable. So I think you really need to live in Japan for a number of years to understand many things, because you see them on a surface level, on a sort of almost like an attempted educational level. But it takes a while for you to understand it, because you need to see it in context. And you can only do that by living in Japan for extended time.
Yeah. I think you'll be a really great ambassador in that aspect, because, and I see this, spirit of sustainability, harmony is not really only about Japan. I see it actually in every society, in every culture. For example, when I was in the UK, I noticed that when the English people wanted to say something to other people, they don't necessarily say it aloud. I mean, they, make it felt in social. You know what I mean? So I think it's actually everywhere, and it's something that you can learn and apply in your life. And even in a business meeting situation, you have drinks together and you become friends, and that's helpful in a business situation too. So there are these implicit process of getting together and doing something together in a harmonious way for mutual benefits. And I think that's happening everywhere. I see it happening everywhere. But as you said, probably the Japanese people, uh, very well
Yes.
advanced in that aspect compared
The rest of
to
the world, yes.
American, Australian, yeah,
Actually, my
people.
father is English, and you're right, if there's something I would describe about my father, he's been very logical. My father was a physicist, but he was always he's
Uh,
always been very careful with his words, and I have no memory of him being aggressive or demanding, and he just seemed to be able to understand the situation and say the best thing for
mm,
all involved. Yeah, so
uh-huh.
I think you're right that the English seem to have an idea of it perhaps more than Americans or Australians.
Yeah.
So another pillar, and for me, maybe this was more meaningful for me than the others. I mean, they're all meaningful to me, but I think releasing yourself is probably something we all
Mm,
struggle with. So, in a nutshell, releasing yourself is, in order to be happy, you need to accept who you are. Um, and you
yeah.
write this, and I had to reread this a few times because at first I thought it was a mistake, but it's not. So, accepting yourself is one of the most important and difficult tasks we face in our lives. Indeed, accepting oneself is one of the easiest, simplest, and most rewarding things you can do for yourself. A low budget, maintenance-free formula for being happy. So this is so true. If we struggle to accept ourselves, because we have all this history and past and confusion and stress and worry, but if we understand, accepting oneself is an easy solution. If everyone can do it, it's just a choice, really. So you look like you have accepted yourself perhaps a long time ago and almost completely. Was that hard for you to do, or was that easy for you to do?
Yeah, it was actually very hard to do. I'm a nerd. I used to be a nerd, and nerds are not so popular among girls, And there are these sports type guys, and when I started my work on TV, all these people in TV business, they tend to be more beautiful, more gorgeous, more handsome, and look at me. I mean, I'm like a bear, with some funny hairdo, and so but at the end of the day, you ask the question: Would you rather be another person than you? I mean, would you trade the places with some other people? And the answer is no. You have all these histories, and you have your individual views about life and world, and you want to be, you. I mean, in the future too, because that's something you are committed to. Probably not with your own choice when you were born. You were born with genetic makeup, and you were born with these unique individual traits, which probably might not be idealistic, ideal situation. But as you get along with your life and you kind of build on your own, experience, you start to feel that probably this is your destiny. That this is something you would love to live up with. This your own individual self. So when you realize that, you stop comparing you with other people, and you just focus on being you, and that makes you the most relaxed person in the world. When Nick, I meet a lot of people when I go about Japan and abroad, and I find that these people who give other people stress, like, when you are with some certain types of person, you feel really uneasy. You don't feel relaxed. But often you find that these people actually have not accepted themselves. They have something that is not really comfortable about being themselves, and that transmits to other people. You can feel that if somebody is not comfortable with himself or herself, they tend to be really,
negative and
negative, stressful, oppressive,
reactive.
react. Yeah. So by being yourself, you not necessarily you not only become happy, but you can also be a better person for all the people around you. So that's why I think accepting yourself or releasing yourself is the single important objective in your life. Yeah. Have you accepted yourself, Nick?
I think I'm learning to. I don't think I've accepted myself fully. I still have fears, and I certainly like myself a lot more than I did, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, even 1 year ago. If I look at you, I think, Ken Mogi is this neuroscientist rock star in Japan. I mean, you're very famous in Japan, and you share all this wonderful wisdom and joy. So if you had not accepted yourself, and let's say you just stuck to research and you stayed in your lab and you weren't comfortable being who you were, we wouldn't be talking. I wouldn't have read your book. You probably wouldn't have written your book. So I think what you say is so true. If we can accept ourselves, we can almost become the better version of ourselves, because we're not afraid anymore and we're not worried, we're not comparing ourselves.
Yeah, so I think the most beautiful wisdom is that if there are 100 people, there will be 100 ways to accept yourself because each person is different. So that's the beauty of it. Each of us having our own way of going about in life, and we can be all different, comfortably different.
Yeah.
So
This is such an important point. Do you have any specific advice on how to accept yourself?
wow.
That's a hard question.
Look at yourself in the mirror. I mean, when I say mirror, the mirror neurons in the brain. Where it's the mirror to reflect yourself is not in your bathroom. It's in other people. So when you meet with other people, like we are doing now, I see a part of me reflected on you, reflecting through you, coming back to me. And I hope the same thing is happening to you. From me. And so I think that's the beauty of meeting with people. You actually meet your mirrors on which you are reflected, and you get to know yourself better and through meeting with people. And that way you gradually come to a deeper realization of who you are. And then presto, you will be able to accept yourself, hopefully. Yeah.
That's awesome advice. So really, we should get out more, meet people, and rather than judge, have compassion and see ourselves within them.
Yeah. Yeah, because for example, Australia, I mean, people tend to, regard Australia as a kind of a wild, you know, down, down under, and people with simple ideas and so on. But
Laid back.
yeah, but when I meet with some of my colleagues from Australia, they are the most exotically deep thinkers in the world.
Oh wow.
Like David Chalmers. David Chalmers. He's a philosopher of mind guy. He studies the hard problem of consciousness. He's from Australia, but he's one of the deepest thinkers in the world, and that can be said about Australian culture in general. There's something that is exotically deep about Australian culture, and when you get to know that, you feel as if you are discovering a new continent, well, literally a new continent. But and at the same time, you start to understand yourself better by encountering with people of different culture, but with equivalent depth. So you realize that you start to feel that maybe there's something more to yourself too, because you know what I mean. I mean,
I do know what you mean. Yes. Despite us being all different, there is a core to us that's the same.
yeah, yeah,
And if we can share that core, then there's probably no need to be afraid. And if I like you, you like me, I like people. So why can't we just like and accept ourselves?
sure, yeah,
Yeah, I think any culture there you can connect with people and share this sense of this depth and knowledge and emotion and understanding. And I guess if you've accepted yourself, probably very easy for you to do that.
yeah. There's a fascinating Bill Bryson book on Australia.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, he writes about all these huge lobsters, and all on the top of restaurants and buildings and so on. You guys have these huge lobsters, and
Lobsters.
so why?
I don't know why.
But that's Australia, isn't it? It's a uniquely individual culture, and
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
so
like I mean, every culture. I guess, yeah. I mean, your own culture, you're so used to it, you forget everything it has to offer. But yeah, I love my country, and I'm proud of who we are. And I guess recently with the bushfires, I realised how loved our country is because
yeah,
so many people want to help. So that's sort of satisfying and good to know.
yeah.
So, Ken, I know we're probably going to run out of time soon. So, pillar one is the one I really wanted to get clarity on, because you mentioned two concepts. You mentioned starting small
Mhm.
and this fascinating concept of kodawari. Starting small, is the context for that in anything? So in our work, in our hobbies.
Yeah, yeah. Kodawari is a really beautiful example. I think, as I mentioned in the book, Kodawari has nothing to do with marketing, financial reward. For a really typical example is of a ramen restaurant owner who really goes very particular about his ramen noodle. I mean, soup and noodles and ingredients, and customers actually might not notice the difference in the beginning. I mean, it's the shop owner wants to make his ramen noodle really particular, but customers don't care really in the beginning. But as time goes on, reputations will start to spread in the society, and there will be queues of people, wanting to have a bowl of ramen at his restaurant. So I think starting small is like that. First there are small things that you really care about, and probably other people don't care about it so much. They don't care, so you cannot really get financial rewards in the beginning. But as time goes on, your enthusiasm kind of spreads to other people, and you start to be recognized. But that would come only at a later stage. We have seen that happen in many different fields like manga and anime. These industries started so small. It started from people who really cared about small things, and they went on with their own ways, and then people started to notice, and now it's a huge industry. But so it is all these small joys and love and kills that really matters and kickstarts your life. And yeah,
And so the buy what I think is the success and money seems to be the byproduct
yeah,
of that
yeah.
process rather than the goal. So it's not the goal. But I wanted to give our audience a clear definition of kodawari.
Kodawari, yeah.
I've read it's the relentless devotion to one's craft. You describe it in your book as an approach whereby you take extraordinary care of the very small details. If we're doing that, you can only do that in small steps then.
Yeah,
You can only start small.
yeah.
So is kodawari really the accumulation of small steps of starting small?
Oh,
Because I was thinking, one end you've got start small, and at the other end you've almost got. I mean, kodawari is all close to perfection. You'll never have perfection, but kodawari seems the pursuit of perfection, even though you will never get it. So Japanese seem to know there's never perfection, but I'll try and get there, knowing I will never get there.
yeah, you are spot on there. Actually,
Yeah.
you have described one of the most important, probably Japanese philosophy right now. People do know that there's no perfection, but people do appreciate the effort to reach perfection, even if they would never, achieve that. So it's everywhere. You see it everywhere, even in manga. If you look at today's popular manga, it's all about searching for perfection and trying to achieve perfection, but never really achieving it. Even the manga that are read by teenagers, you see it everywhere. It's this search of perfection and never achieving it. It's you're happy with that, because the process of trying to achieve perfection is the whole thing. I mean, you really don't, the holy grail of perfection is not really something that you would be happy to when you achieve that. And the process of getting is what.
It's the experience, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Because if you got there, it would stop.
Yeah, if you get, you'd often find that what you were striving for was not so valuable after all,
Yeah.
But it's a of trying to achieve perfection. You see it everywhere. So Nick, you've been to Japan many times and you have experience. So you see it everywhere in Japanese society, from convenience stores to ramen noodle shops, and where people, going, trying to do their jobs perfectly.
I'll give you a good example. My father-in-law, he makes shinoyaki pottery.
Does he? Wow, wonderful.
Yeah. So he makes matcha jawan,
Uh-huh.
and he's 80, and he still makes it every day,
Wonderful.
almost every day. Now, a few years ago, like 10 years ago or 20 years ago, he was trying to make, he had an anagama,
Uh-huh.
a mountain kill,
Yeah.
and he was trying to make the perfect matcha jawan using traditional methods.
Uh-huh.
And he could only do it certain times of the year because of the temperature. So I think he could only do it in the autumn or spring.
Uh-huh.
The first two failed. He purchased land, he built the mountain kill, he had his local community help. First two times were disastrous.
Uh-huh.
None of the pottery was good enough to do the second fire.
Uh-huh.
And then on the third time, he got somewhere, and he actually got some of the matcha jawans that were good enough to share and sell.
Wow.
But for him, it really was this process, and he wasn't even disappointed when it didn't work the first or second time. And I found that I kind of struggled with it. I thought, wow, it didn't work, but he's still trying. So yeah, you're right. You see it if you're fortunate enough to go to Japan, you can see it everywhere. If you can notice, because Japan is like such a place of contrast. There's all this technology and noise and pachinko and craziness going on, and then you have these fine traditional arts and beauty. But also you have, as you say, these ramen chefs trying to make a specific type of ramen. You have all these meibutsus,
souvenirs,
special foods to certain regions. And you could live 100 lives in Japan and you still wouldn't understand all the cultural aspects of the country and all the local cultural aspects of Japan, because there's so much to experience and offer, Japan has so much to offer, and so you can just delve into this culture. So I've always been fascinated and appreciated and want to go back there.
Yeah, please do.
Because
the story of your father-in-law is really fascinating. I think that's probably a pristine example of what Japanese culture is all about. And did you mention shinoyaki?
Shinoyaki, yeah.
Yes, because as you know, shinoyaki is one of the great, achievements. Has been one of the greatest achievements of Japanese ware. And the stakes are really high. A really good quality shinoyaki can fetch really high prices.
Yeah, and I understand it. It's quite a difficult style of pottery to achieve. Yeah,
so
and it's very distinct.
Your father-in-law knows what is at stake. I mean, and these wares, transferred from generation to generation. They outlive a person's lives, and your father-in-law's wares could be used, hundreds of years from now.
Hopefully, yeah.
And it could even become a national treasure, So
I know you mentioned the starry bowls in your book as an example. Yeah.
So the stakes are high, So no wonder your father-in-law tries to achieve that. I mean, and 82, wow, amazing.
80, yeah.
He's very young spirited, and he's a young at heart, and Oh,
Yeah, he's still very healthy and young at heart, and I think he's accepted himself. So
wonderful.
he accepted himself a long time ago. So I think he's very content. So, Cal, I know we've probably got to go, but I just wanted to touch on what you're doing, and probably what's important to you at the moment is your qualia,
Yeah,
your work on
yeah.
qualia manifesto. Do you want to briefly talk about that?
Well, yeah, Korea, the sensory qualities like redness of red and, the coolness of water. And the greatest challenge of neuroscience today is to understand how Korea, or the consciousness that encompasses it, arises from neural activities in the brain. And that's my life work, apart from many different things. So, yeah, I hope, fingers crossed. Even if I cannot solve it, if I can contribute to some new advancements or developments in a small way, that will make me really happy, and fingers crossed. And yeah.
Well, good luck with that. Do you see that as your ikigai, or would that be your kokorozashi? Is that your personal mission,
Oh,
or are they both?
both,
Is it
yeah,
something of both? Yeah.
both.
Okay.
But talking to you like this is also my ikigai. So
Oh, thank you.
a whole spectrum of things. But I really learned a lot from this conversation. So I really thank you for that. And
I'd love to interview you on many other things, so hopefully we'll do that.
let's do that. It's such a fun, and I would like to see you in person.
I'm going to take you out for a beer. Hopefully I'll do that this year.
Okay.
So thank you so much for your time today, Ken.
Nice talking to you. Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Ikigai Podcast. To download Ikigai worksheets, to take the Ikigai questionnaire, or to join the Ikigai tribe, please visit ikigaitribe.com.